When Shapur II ascended to power in the Sasanian Empire, he sought to reclaim territories that had been lost to the Roman Empire. After defeating the Arabs in the southern regions, he turned his attention to the east to confront nomadic forces, particularly the Shanites. Following a protracted conflict from 353 to 358, the Shanites were compelled to seek peace, and their leader, Grumbates, joined Shapur in the campaign against the Romans. Despite the Romans' attempts to dissuade Shapur from attacking Mesopotamia, he launched an invasion in 359 as part of his western campaign. In 359, Constantius, recognizing the imminent threat, implemented personnel changes among the staff. He transferred some seasoned commanders to the east with the goal of leading operations against Shapur's army. Domitius Modestus was dispatched to Euphrates and Mesopotamia, while Ursicinus replaced Barbatio as second in command under Sabinianus. As events transpired, Ursicinus effectively became the commanding general of the Limitene armies of Mesopotamia and Osrhoene, while Sabinianus continued as the commander of the Comitatus of the East. This arrangement went against the principle of war known as unity of command. Unity of effort relies on having a single responsible commander, a principle which the Romans frequently breached in late antiquity. However, cooperation between the appointed commanders usually mitigated this violation. In this case, however, the command relationship failed. Ursicinus commanded a small maneuver force in the province of Mesopotamia. The regular garrison of Amida was made up of the Legion 5th Parthia, along with an unidentified cavalry regiment. Additionally, a detachment from 10th Fortenses, the Limitanius Legion of Palestine, was present during the siege. This detachment, which may have numbered around 300 men, was over 300 miles away from its home base at Aila in Palestina Salutaris. The Gallic legions Magnentius, Decentius, and 30th Ulpia Victrix were also in the region, but had not been assigned to any specific fortress. These legions were among the 6 legions and 2 cavalry regiments dispatched from Gaul by Julian, late in 358. 2 newly arrived Illyrian cavalry regiments, with a combined strength of 700, and an element of the Comite Sagittari cavalry regiment were present as well. Count Aelianus and his light legions Superventors and Preventires were in the region, but were not assigned to any specific city. Count Aelianus' 2 legions of Catchers and Preventers may have been the field army of the Trans-Tigris regions and had been ordered to Amida by Ursicinus. In this unpredictable circumstance, Ursicinus chooses to relocate his modest command center and guards to Amida. Upon Ursicinus' arrival at Amida, he had a mixed comitatus and limitane maneuver force consisting of 3 heavy legions, 2 light legions, and 3 cavalry regiments in the fortified zone. Ursicinus did not have the combat strength to oppose Shapur's main army in the field, or even engage a large raiding party, but he did have sufficient reserves to reinforce a fortress that was projected to be attacked by Shapur, or to harass the royal army's supply and lines of communication while it besieged a fortress. Amida was a strongly fortified town, and the Nisibis-Mardan-Amida road passed through mountainous terrain in which a small Roman force could block and hold off a larger Persian force. The invasion routes planned by Shapur to attack Rome were discussed with the traitor Antoninus. After much deliberation, it was decided, based on Antoninus's advice, to abandon the risky sieges of cities and cross the Euphrates barrier. The Iranian army crossed the Greater Zab and then the Tigris north of Singara, while the Romans anticipated an attack on Zeugma and left the poorly defended city of Keri. Cassianus, the Dux of Mesopotamia, implemented scorched earth tactics and fortified the near bank of the Euphrates with various defenses. Sabinianus prepared to defend Edessa. The Iranian army then feigned an attack toward the Euphrates but actually bypassed Nisibis. After a 12-day march, they reached Babase, approximately 50 km west of Nisibis. Although Ammianus Marcellinus claimed that crossing the flooded Euphrates was impossible and resulted in a change of their direction toward the north. Considering the Iranian engineers' expertise in handling hydrodynamic matters, it's plausible to assume that North Mesopotamia, Amida, and not Syria, were Shapur's initial targets. Despite the well-established security measures of the two Illyrian cavalry regiments, Romans failed to detect and report the advance of the Persian vanguard, led by the Persian general Tamsaper and guided by the traitor Antoninus, riding toward Amida. Ursicinus and his staff only became aware of the Persians' presence when they left Amida early in the morning twilight on their way to Zeugma and Capersana to ensure the bridges over the Euphrates had been destroyed. They unexpectedly encountered the lead cavalry regiment of Tamsaper's vanguard. Ursicinus' escort, reinforced with additional cavalry, engaged the Persian advance guard. Ammianus does not provide the exact size of Ursicinus' escort, but it was sufficient to hold off the Persian vanguard regiment for half an hour. During a brief pause in the skirmish, Ursicinus conversed with the traitor Antoninus. Antoninus explained to Ursicinus that he was coerced into treason, and that seeking help from Ursicinus would not have saved him from the unscrupulous individuals to whom he owed a debt. As more Persians joined the ensuing melee, Ursicinus' escort was scattered, with Ammianus narrowly making it back to Amida with a wounded comrade. The surviving Romans were pursued to the banks of the Tigris, with Ursicinus managing to escape with a tribune and a single groom. As the sun rose over the Roman city of Amida, the tension in the air was palpable. Tamsaper's vanguard had already established a formidable cordon around the city, trapping Ursicinus' only significant mobile reserve within its walls. The Persian main army, led by the formidable Sahansa Shapur, marched steadily towards Amida, capturing the Roman forts of Riman and Busan along the way. From the ramparts of Amida, the defenders watched with a mix of apprehension and resolve as the Persian army approached. The gleam of mail-clad cavalry and the glint of shining weapons stretched as far as the eye could see, a sight that struck fear into the hearts of both combatants and civilians alike. Sasanian siege engines were quickly brought into operation, hurling powerful projectiles into the city with deadly accuracy. The air was filled with the screams of the wounded and the crash of masonry as buildings crumbled under the relentless assault. But Shapur, it seemed, had not originally intended to besiege Amida. Instead, he sought to bypass it. Clad in full armor, he rode boldly within hailing distance of the city's main gate, demanding its surrender. Yet, the response he received was not one of submission, but of defiance. Arrows and bolts rained down from the walls, a testament to the steadfastness of the Roman defenders. Among them stood Count Alienus and his preventers and catchers, who had been a thorn in the Persian side for the past decade. Their refusal to yield only served to enrage Shapur further, fueling his determination to conquer the city at any cost. The Sasanian siege batteries resumed their deadly barrages, pounding the city walls relentlessly. Undeterred, Shapur led his elite Savarin in repeated assaults against the gates, which had been weakened by the ceaseless bombardment. Each time, they were met with a hail of missiles and lances from the defenders above. Heliodorus had described the armor of the Savarin as proof against any missiles, yet the dense barrages unleashed by the Amidan defenders proved otherwise. The sheer concentration and force of their missile volleys overwhelmed even the most heavily armored warriors, driving them back from the gates time and again. But the Persians were not without their own formidable weapons. Powerful ballista rained down upon the city, wreaking havoc on its defenses and causing chaos among the defenders. Despite the ferocity of the assaults, the walls of Amida held firm. As evening fell, the Sassanids were forced to retreat, their attempts to breach the city thwarted by the unwavering courage and determination of its defenders. And so, the siege of Amida continued, a brutal testament to the enduring struggle between two mighty empires locked in a desperate battle for supremacy. The following day, King Grumbates, an ally of the Persians from the Shanite, and his son boldly approached the walls of Amida to demand the surrender of the Romans. A ballista bolt fired by the defenders tragically struck and killed Grumbates' son. Both sides engaged in a fierce exchange of arrows and bolts until nightfall. According to Ammianus, it was customary for Shapur to capture Amida as a gesture of appeasement to satisfy King Grumbates' desire for vengeance. The Persians and their allies mourned the prince's death for 7 days. A war council convened, and during this meeting, a decision was made to alter the campaign strategy and lay siege to Amida. As the grieving period for the fallen Shanite prince came to an end, the Persians wasted no time in preparing for the next phase of the siege. For 2 days, they scoured the surrounding region, plundering villages and towns for supplies and materials to sustain their assault on the formidable city of Amida. On the 3rd day, the Sassanid royal army reorganized their forces, readying themselves for a renewed onslaught. With meticulous strategy, the Persian royal army encircled the city, their ranks stretching 5 men deep, a formidable display of military might designed to intimidate the Roman legions within. To the north stood the Albanian cavalry, their banners fluttering in the breeze, while to the west, war elephants trumpeted their presence, a fearsome sight meant to strike terror into the hearts of the defenders. The Sakas of Sakistan also positioned themselves to the west, their nomadic skills in archery adding a deadly dimension to the Persian arsenal. And to the east, the Shanites, fierce and relentless, awaited the signal to launch their assault. At the forefront of the southern flank stood Shapur himself, accompanied by his royal escort, possibly the Pushtigban, the trusted guardians of the Persian king. Clad in resplendent armor, Shapur exuded an aura of authority and command as he surveyed the city below. With a thunderous roar, the Persian forces surged forward, unleashing a torrent of infantry and cavalry upon the walls of Amida. The air was rent with the twang of bowstrings and the thunder of hooves as the Persians launched wave after wave of relentless attacks. But the defenders of Amida were not so easily cowed. From their lofty vantage points atop the city walls, they unleashed a barrage of arrows and bolts, their aim true and deadly. Ballista and scorpions belched forth their payloads, wreaking havoc among the ranks of the advancing enemy. As the war elephants lumbered closer, their massive forms casting shadows over the battlefield, the Romans resorted to desperate measures. With flaming torches held aloft, they hurled fire against the thick hides of the beasts, driving them into a frenzied panic and causing chaos among the Persian lines. Despite the ferocity of the assault, the defenders of Amida held fast, their resolve unbroken. Wave after wave of Persian attackers crashed against the walls, only to be repelled time and again by the stalwart defenders within. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the Persians were forced to withdraw once more, their hopes of breaching the walls of Amida dashed by the courage and determination of those who fought to defend it. But the siege was far from over. The next morning, the Persians once again encircled the city, launching a coordinated assault on its walls from 3 directions upon the signal from their king. Both sides unleashed a barrage of arrows, bolts, and rocks, resulting in casualties on both the attacking and defending forces. The Persians effectively utilized siege engines, previously captured during the sack of Singara, to bolster their assault. Despite the garrison receiving reinforcements, the defenders were forced to fight in shifts to maintain their defense. As the assaults persisted over several days, the defenders encountered difficulties disposing of the bodies of fallen soldiers. The combination of humid heat and decaying corpses led to the outbreak of pestilence within the city. The pestilence only abated on the 10th day after a brief rainfall washed the city clean and refreshed the stifling air, providing some relief to the beleaguered defenders. The Persians, realizing that a direct assault on the city was not feasible, initiated a formal siege by building defensive structures such as mantelets to shield archers, mines, penthouses to protect rams, and siege towers to position artillery and dislodge the defenders from the walls. In response, the defenders erected their own defensive works to counter the Persian tactics and effectively employed their artillery. Skirmishes between the slingers and archers on both sides persisted. The Gallic legions Magnentius, Decentius, and Ulpia Victrix consisted of robust, agile men accustomed to open field combat, rather than the demanding tasks of a prolonged siege. Despite their officers prohibiting unauthorized sorties, they persisted in conducting daring but fruitless sallies, resulting in unnecessary casualties and discontent among the troops. On a remote tower situated on the southern wall, perched on a cliff with a commanding view of the Tigris River, lay an underground passage hewn through the rock and leading down to the river. The passage was so steep that it remained unguarded. A disloyal civilian had defected to the Persians and guided a group of 70 elite Persian archers through the passage at midnight, successfully capturing the tower without detection. At sunrise, they unfurled a red cloak from the tower, signaling for another Persian assault. As Persian ladders ascended the wall, the archers in the tower unleashed a barrage of arrows at the Roman defenders on the walls. Faced with incoming arrows from the tower and an assault on the walls, the Romans swiftly adapted to the situation. They deployed 5 light ballista to target the archers in the tower. The crews swiftly neutralized the Persian archers in the tower and repositioned their weapons to fend off the assault. By noon, the Persians realized that their plan had faltered and ceased their assault after sustaining substantial losses. In the early hours of the following day, the Persians paraded a multitude of captives captured after the fall of the Roman fortress of Zaida before the defenders of Amida. Zaida, a significant fortress encompassed by defensive walls spanning over a mile, was seized by Persian detachments, along with other Roman forts constituting the Amida lines. The captives included both the defenders of these forts and the civilian population seeking refuge within them. The mistreatment of captives, including hamstringing the elderly and infirm who couldn't keep pace with the captive column, incited a call for vengeance from the Gallic legionaries. In response, Count Alienus authorized a raid on the Persian outposts to assuage their aggressive spirit. The raid, planned to catch the Persians off guard, was scheduled for a few days after the captive column passed Amida. Count Alienus granted the raiding force permission to breach the Persian outpost line, situated just beyond missile range, and, if successful, to continue the attack and sow maximum chaos. Notably, Count Alienus had previously earned recognition as a young staff officer, leading a similar raid during the siege of the fortress of Singara in 348. While the Gallic legionaries made preparations for the raid, the remaining garrison manned the defenses, engaging in an exchange of arrows and bolts with the Persians. When the Persians erected 2 substantial earthworks, the Romans countered with 2 of their own to thwart the Persian efforts. On the night of the new moon, the Gallic legionaries, hardened and disciplined soldiers of the Roman Empire, stood ready in the shadow of their fortifications. Their eyes gleamed with determination, and their hearts beat with a steady, controlled rhythm of trained warriors, led by their seasoned Campidoctors, who had molded them into a formidable fighting force. The legionaries moved with a silent purpose. Through a small, concealed postern gate, they emerged like phantoms from the walls of Amida. The close order formation, a hallmark of Roman military precision, made them appear as a single, undulating entity, their armor and weapons a seamless part of their being. Every man knew his role, every man knew the stakes. With the darkness as their ally, They advanced towards the Persian picket lines, where sentries slumbered, lulled into false security by the tranquil night. In a swift, coordinated strike, the legionaries fell upon the sleeping sentries. Blades flashed in the moonless night, and the sentries were dispatched with lethal efficiency. The element of surprise was theirs. With the initial barrier breached, the legionaries pressed on, charging into the heart of the Persian camp. Tents loomed like dark phantoms, and within them, the enemy slumbered. The Romans moved swiftly, cutting down those who lay in their path, but the element of surprise was fleeting. The sounds of the attack, screams, the clash of steel, and the desperate calls of dying men stirred the Persian camp to life. The sudden, brutal assault threw the Persian camp into chaos. Shouts of alarm and the clanging of weapons echoed through the tents as the Persians scrambled from their beds. Some stumbled out, still half asleep, only to be cut down by the relentless Roman advance. Groggy and disoriented, Persian soldiers poured out of their tents, an angry mob seeking the source of the disturbance. They found the Romans, not as scattered raiders, but in disciplined formation, their shields locked together, their faces grim and determined. The Persians attacked in a frenzied rush, an undisciplined mass driven by rage. The Romans, though outnumbered, held their ground. Their training and discipline showed as they fought back, their movements controlled, their lines unbroken. But the pressure was immense, and the sheer numbers of the Persians began to force the Romans back. Recognizing the growing danger, the Cappadoctors made a quick decision. They began a fighting withdrawal. Their men moving back step by step, shields raised, swords striking out at any who ventured too close. It was a dangerous maneuver, requiring perfect coordination, but the legionaries executed it flawlessly. As the Romans retreated toward Amida, the sound of Persian trumpets echoed through the night, rallying more and more soldiers to the fight. The noise was deafening, the confusion palpable. Yet the Romans did not falter. They continued their measured withdrawal, every step taking them closer to the safety of their walls. From the walls, the Roman artillery began to operate, the creaking of the engines and the thudding of mechanisms echoing through the night. Though no projectiles flew through the air, the sound alone was a psychological weapon. The Persians, unable to see the battlefield clearly, hesitated. The imagined rain of stones and bolts from the Roman engines made them wary of pursuing too closely. Taking full advantage of this hesitation, the legionaries made their final push towards the city. The gates swung open, and the Romans, still in their disciplined formation, flowed through. The Cappadoctors ensured the retreat was orderly, every legionary accounted for as they re-entered the safety of Amida's walls. The gates clanged shut behind them, and the Roman trumpets blared a triumphant note. The Persians, disorganized and cautious in the face of the perceived artillery threat, withdrew, their trumpets signaling a retreat. The Romans had struck a blow and returned to tell the tale. The raid, though perilous, had succeeded. Inside the walls of Amida, the legionaries caught their breath, their eyes still sharp, their hands still steady. They knew the battle was far from over, but tonight they had faced the storm and emerged victorious. Outside the walls, the flames of Persian retaliation blazed fiercely, but inside, the flames of Roman determination blazed even fiercer. The attacking force suffered the loss of 400 Gallic legionaries, while some prominent Persian leaders were killed while defending the camp. However, the Persian siege works remained largely undamaged. Both parties agreed to a 3-day truce, providing the Romans with respite and the Persians with the opportunity to bury their fallen nobles. Despite Constantius later honoring the raid leaders with statues in Edessa, the raid itself proved unsuccessful. The 3 legions involved suffered almost a quarter of their forces, resulting in minimal impact on the Persian nobility. The Gallic legionaries' victory can be seen as Pyrrhic at best. After the truce, the siege continued with intensity. The Persians deployed siege towers, but they were promptly taken down by Roman artillery. Despite various attempts, the Persians failed to breach the walls of Amida. During a particularly fierce battle, Shapur, adorned in full regalia, advanced close to the walls and was targeted by Roman artillery. Miraculously, he emerged unscathed. When all other tactics failed, Shapur ordered the construction of a siege ramp to tower over the Roman walls. Unfazed, the Roman engineers promptly matched this construction. As the 73rd day of the siege dawned, it seemed that Shapur's efforts would be futile. However, as the day progressed, the Roman mound suddenly collapsed, bridging the gap between the wall and the Persian siege ramp. The collapse of the city wall was likely caused by a Persian mine, which filled the gap between the city wall and the Persian ramp, enabling the Persians to enter the city unimpeded. Following the collapse, Persian assault troops swiftly crossed over the wall, overwhelming the Roman garrison before they could mount a defense. It is believed that the collapse of the mound was a pre-planned event orchestrated by Persian engineers. Count Alienus' skilled defense of the city resulted in significant casualties for the Persian army, with reports suggesting around 30,000 losses. After the sacking and destruction of the city, the Persian campaign concluded with the fall of Amida. Subsequently, Count Alienus and his senior officers were executed, while the survivors were taken into captivity across the Tigris River. With the arrival of autumn, the Persians found themselves unable to advance any further. After dedicating the campaign season to the siege of a single city, Shapur suffered significant losses, with as many as 30,000 casualties, and his eastern allies abandoned him due to heavy losses. The region remained in dispute and likely under Persian control for a few years. The Romans reconquered Amida in 363 during Emperor Julian's campaign